My name is Shannon Blessing, and my job is I'm a provider for kids that have special needs. So my mom took me to church, and parents took me to church when I was young, so I've always had a pretty close relationship with God. When I was younger growing up, I wasn't really close to God. I kind of didn't understand the power of God at that time, but I believed in God and Jesus and Mary, and I went to a Christian school, and so that's basically how I got into learning about Jesus, is just growing up from my parents being my examples when I was younger. God really came into my life and helped me. In 2001, my mom was diagnosed with a disease called Wegener's granulomatosis, and they caught it late, and my mom's kidneys had failed, and that's how we found out she had this disease. We thought she just had like a chronic sinus infection forever. So my mom, I quit my job, and I helped take care of my mom for about 4 years, and it was really hard. It was the hardest time of my whole life. She had surgery after surgery because when her kidneys failed, it basically affects everything else. During this 4-year period, I had my 2 smallest children. I had Sierra and Madison, and so I was taking care of my mom because my dad had to work. She'd be in and out of the hospital. She was at the hospital for just like sometimes 8 months at a time, and I'd visit her every day with all my little kids in tow, and it was extremely, extremely hard. And so what happened was, my mom was just my best friend. She never complained. She was just such a loving person. And sometimes I would get to the point, if something else, like she'd have another stroke or something would happen, and I would just like, can it get worse? And it really would. She would just get worse, but then she'd kind of stabilize. And I think if I didn't have God in my life, I became so close to God because I felt like I was drowning. It's like when you have your role model and your best friend, and all of a sudden you're their caretaker. It's like you're their parent. It's a role reversal, which is hard to start off with, but it was just very, very, it was a horrible time, but it was bittersweet. It was also kind of a great time because I could spend so much time with my mom. My mom died on September 8th of 2005, and she had been in ICU for 2 months, and she said, "Is it okay for me to die today?" And I said, "Mom, if you want to be with the Lord, you can be with the Lord." So she wanted to die in an hour, but it took the entire day. And the funny thing is, looking back, I mean, during the day, it was just, if someone wants to be with the Lord, it's hard for them to get there till God's ready. She'd say, "I'm too hot," and so I'd take off her covers. "I'm too cold." I'd put the covers back on and put me up closer to God. So I'd lift up her head, and I just prayed. I'd always pray the Lord's Prayer, the Hail Mary and the Glory Be over and over for her. And she'd want me to do cheers from like junior high, so I'd sing the Be Aggressive cheer. And we're in ICU, and the nurses are just like bawling. And anyway, she passed away that night. And if I didn't have a close relationship with God after that, because when you have such an intense 4 years, and then all of a sudden you think, okay, it's over now, I can kind of breathe a sigh of relief, just because they're not in pain anymore, like a kind of depression came over me. And I had 3 little kids to take care of. So I just thought, okay, God, come on. And he just guided me with what I needed to do, and I got back into things, and he just really was like my rock through the whole thing. Like the poem where it says, where God, there's the footprints poem, how God is, there's 2 sets of footprints, but then there's one set, and in the end you say, why was there one? Well, that's when God's carrying you. Well, God carried me.